Seattle! I'm not Bernie Sanders. So good evening, are you all a little excited? I'm excited. I'm Lynn Dodson. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. I am delighted to be here to welcome Senator Bernie Sanders, presidential candidate to Washington State. And to Seattle. Seattle, the home of the $15 an hour minimum wage, paid sick leave, and our own Socialist City Councilwoman, Symone. So you all know this is also the eve of the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, and we know at this time we have to commit to justice. Black lives matter. You know, you all are going to make my 2 minutes go before I can say what I have to say. The labor movement is proud to be part of the fight for working people in Washington, the U.S., and around the globe. That fight's about power and wealth. And the inequality that we're seeing of power and wealth manifests itself in acts of violence. Violence that takes the form of racism and sexism, poverty, unemployment, denial of health care, starvation of our public services, attacks on unions and on the rights of workers. That domination of power and wealth manifests itself in the denial of voting rights, in mass incarceration, and in trade agreements that ship jobs overseas and exploit workers in other countries. All of this enriching multinational corporations and billionaires at the expense of 99% of the world's population. In this presidential campaign, we might have expected the mean-spirited war on the workers' hatred from the Republican Party, coupled with soaring rhetoric, but substantive silence of many Democrats. That leaves voters powerless and feeling ignored. But instead, we got Bernie Sanders. Welcome to all of you who support this campaign of energy, optimism, and hope. Welcome to all who believe that the fight for economic and social justice is critical and that the presidential campaign must be about restoring the middle class, combating the legacy of racism, sexism, and heterosexism, and planning policies and programs that will actually create a better world for all of us and for the future. We know why we're here. We know why Bernie's campaign is so important to our democracy right now. We heed the words of Dolores Huerta, labor activist, labor leader, and farm worker. Every moment is an organizing moment. Every person a potential activist. Every minute a chance to change the world. Welcome to Seattle, Senator Bernie Sanders. Thank you for helping us change the world. But before that, I'd like so folks, Disney brothers, you're all so excited.
Keep on rocking in the free world.
You're all an amazing crowd and so excited. But we've got other activists here that want to welcome Senator Sanders and all of you. And so I'm going to welcome, so keep that enthusiasm. Sorry. I planned my remarks really well, but oops. So keep that enthusiasm, because I'd like to welcome up here State Representative Luis Moscoso from the 1st District, a true champion for working people.
Well, thanks a lot, Lynn. I don't look like Bernie Sanders, but you will be seeing him shortly. Louder? Okay. Okay, hold on. Let's get going here. It is an honor to be here with you today. And how awesome is it that we have a chance to hear from a true champion of equality. Come on. When Bernie Sanders talks about income inequality, he makes a lot of powerful people very nervous. Yeah. That's good. They should be nervous, because this campaign is about inclusion, making democracy work for all of us. And the only way to include everyone is to empower everyone. That means guaranteeing every single citizen the right to vote. No obstacles. No obstacles, no roadblocks, no contrived ID required to cast a ballot. Two summers ago, the Supreme Court gutted the National Voting Rights Act. Yeah. And Senator Sanders has already called for that decision to be reversed. Three years ago, I introduced the Voting Rights Act for Washington State in our legislature. But held up by Republicans in the state Senate, it is used as a wedge issue to scare away moderates. I'm glad that Senator Sanders will work with all of us to lead a restoration of voting rights effort on the national level. We, the people, cannot have true power without the guaranteed right to vote. Senator Sanders has a real immigration plan, something very close to my heart and my work to limit the use of ICE detainers by law enforcement here in Washington State. Bernie understands we are a nation of immigrants. While others call for imprisonment or deportation, Senator Sanders calls for compassion and a path to citizenship. That's real reform. That's real leadership. Senator Sanders knows, as do I, that Black lives matter. Racial inequality is as serious as economic inequality. No one should be dehumanized because of their race. Those we trust to enforce our laws must also abide by them. We hope to have all of your support next year in the legislature to pass legislation that will foster constructive relationships between the police and our communities. I know that Bernie will continue to address the issues of disproportionate justice and institutionalized racism in the work he has already undertaken. While other candidates may visit our state to raise money, Bernie Sanders is here today to talk about improving our lives. He's here to talk about equality for everyone, and that's why we're here too. That's why I'm supporting Bernie for president. And why I encourage all of you to do what you can to help elect Bernie President of the United States. And now I'm pleased to introduce Sheldon Prentice, a local leader for peace, the environment, and social justice. Sheldon.
Hi, thank you. I'm speaking here in support of Senator Sanders because I believe he understands more. Louder? Okay. All right. I am here speaking in support of Senator Sanders because I believe he understands more than any other candidate the severity of the climate situation we now face. Climate disruption is upon us as never before. We've seen it in the melting glaciers, the droughts, the fires, the severe storms. But something that distinguishes Bernie is that he, unlike other politicians, is willing to listen to scientists who tell us that we need to act now. And that means reducing atmospheric carbon dioxide levels from the current 400 parts per million to 350 parts per million or less, the point at which the planet stops accumulating solar heat. And this needs to take place by the year 2100. The senator's actions show that he is serious about taking these necessary steps to make this happen. He co-sponsored a bill to stop Arctic drilling. He opposes the Keystone Pipeline, has voted to maintain a moratorium on offshore drilling, supports a carbon tax, and has introduced numerous bills in favor of clean energy. The senator is also in the right place in his opposition to the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement. This corporate-driven so-called trade agreement, which really is just a gift to corporations, if it goes through, will drastically hinder our ability to fight climate change. But luckily for all of us, Bernie has stood up to the corporations and opposes the deal that would have harmed our climate. Thank you, Senator. Please continue your work and your advocacy for our planet. Let's elect Bernie Sanders as the next president. Thank you. I'm sorry. And now I'd like to introduce I'd like to now introduce State Senator Pramila Jayapal, representing the 37th Legislative District, one of the most racially and economically diverse districts in the state. Senator Jayapal.
How's everyone doing out there? I am so excited to be here to welcome Bernie Sanders, presidential candidate for the United States of America, to Washington State. So, you know, I represent the 37th Legislative District in the state of Washington. I'm the only woman of color down there, but believe me, I will not be the last. And most of you who know me know that I've spent the last 20 years of my life fighting for immigrant, civil, and human rights. I started the organization called One America, and together we've been fighting at the federal level for federal immigration reform, and here in the state, we helped draft and pass the Washington State DREAM Act. And I've had the great pleasure of working with activists like you on a whole bunch of issues, and I was proud to work on the $15 minimum wage committee to raise the minimum wage in Seattle. And the first piece of legislation that I passed, that I did not pass, but that I introduced when I got to the state Senate, is a bill to raise the state minimum wage to $12 an hour. And you know what? You know what? My colleague Luis talked about how the Republicans are blocking us on the State Voting Rights Act. They blocked the minimum wage. But what they don't know is that the power of the people is never defeated. And the reason I'm here is because what I have learned in fighting for immigrant rights myself, and as an immigrant myself, is that for the past 2 decades, for as long as we've known, immigrants just want to be respected and treated with dignity. We want the work that we do to clean rooms and pick fruit and help people's kids to be recognized, and we want to come out of the shadows. 11 million people need to come out of the shadows, and we need to do that. And what I know in working for racial justice, what the Black Lives Matter movement has taught us is that black people across the country just want to be respected, recognized, want racism to be called out. It is not enough just for us to say we care. It is not enough. What we have to do is call out personal, individual, and institutionalized racism at every opportunity that we can. And work together to change that. And what I know about the working people's movement, because I've worked with the labor movement for all of my activist life, and what I know is that working people want their work to be paid for fairly, they don't want to be pawns of corporations, and they don't want to earn the least amount of money when they're doing the most amount of work. Bernie Sanders is in this unique moment to bring together all of our movements for racial justice, for economic justice, for immigrant rights, and to fight with us, for us, together to make sure that we are lifting up racism, that we are lifting up inequality, and that we demand a different vision. He has worked his whole life. He has worked his whole life on income inequality, and he has courageously called out corporations and those who are apologists for corporations. And he gets that there is an imperative for immigration reform. And now, as a presidential candidate, he has the opportunity and the platform to take on all of these movements. As we know, they are interwoven like a spider web. They can never be separated. So this is a moment of great promise, right? You feel it, I feel it. Bernie Sanders is exciting and inspiring people across the country and here in Washington State because he has been telling the truth about a lot of things that people need to hear the truth about. And there's a lot more truths that are here to come. There's a lot more truths that our country needs to hear. And I know that Bernie Sanders is going to speak to those truths, expand those truths for all our ears. Black, white, brown, gay, straight, trans, young, old, rich, poor. That is our candidate. And that's why I'm so excited to welcome him. And we have one more fabulous speaker before we get to hear from him. Because here we go. So let me introduce to you the National Youth Chair for the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, who is going to be joining the campaign this week as a national press secretary. Symone Sanders! How you doing, Seattle?
Y'all want to hear from the man of the hour, right? All right, we can do that. But before we get there, I want to talk to y'all for a second. I want to reflect, and I want to talk to you. Is that okay? Okay. Again, my name is Symone Sanders, and I currently serve as the chair of the Youth Committee for the National Coalition for Juvenile Justice, and I'll be joining the campaign this week. Let's get to this conversation. So y'all know, a year ago tomorrow, Officer Darren Wilson shot and killed Michael Brown and left his body lying in the street for 4 hours. Following Michael Brown's death, protesters and activists took to the street of Ferguson, Missouri, and they stayed in the streets for 365 days, galvanizing young people in Seattle, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, Los Angeles, California, Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, and numerous other cities across the country. A year ago tomorrow, young people in America were galvanized in their determinations that these killings had to end and stood up to exclaim, "Enough is enough," and Black Lives Matter. Now, I think we can all agree we have come a long way as a country. But tragedies like Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Sam DuBois, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Walter Scott, and John Crawford are constant reminders that we still have work to do. And that we need people we trust leading this country to get the work done. We need new voices that are not afraid to speak truth about the injustices that are plaguing people of color and the plight of everyday, hardworking Americans. It's important that we say the words Black Lives Matter. But it's also important we have people in political office who are going to turn those words into action. People who not only understand, but people who are ready to do something about the communities across America that are still disenfranchised and suffer from institutional and structural racism. People who understand economic inequality and racial inequality are parallel issues that must be addressed simultaneously. People who are committed to preserving and protecting the right to vote, reforming the juvenile justice and criminal justice systems so we're not locking up a whole generation, but instead we're ending the disgrace that is the mass incarceration of African Americans. People who realize that Dr. King's dream was more than just being able to sit at the lunch counter. It also encompassed the possibility of owning the establishment. When you look into your hearts, and I mean deep down in your hearts, you know which candidate for president will shut down the private prison industry. You know which candidate will have the courage to fight to end unjust mandatory minimums and the death penalty. You know which candidate will move to swiftly implement alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders. And which candidate will really use his Justice Department to protect Black lives. So today, I encourage you to reflect on the lives of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Sam Dubois, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Walter Scott, John Crawford, and all those who have tragically and unjustly lost their lives, whose names we do not know. As we reflect, we must commit ourselves to a multiracial political revolution that fights for racial justice, that fights for social justice, that fights for economic justice. Now, I don't know if you heard, but I know a guy who is just the kind of person we are describing. And lucky for us, he just happens to be running for president of the United States of America. Whether we're talking about advocating for workers' rights to form unions, jobs for our kids, fighting to end institutional racism, fighting for quality and affordable education for people who work hard, humane-based community policing, comprehensive immigration reform, or ending Citizens United and getting big money out of politics? Senator Sanders is the candidate who, with our support, will bring the transformative change, the political revolution that this country needs. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my honor to present to you the next president of the United States of America, Senator Bernie